What's going on, everybody? My name is Franco, and today I'm going to keep up my series of ranking and predicting each team's fantasy season for 2022. Today we're going to be focusing on the New England Patriots, continuing to round out the AFC East. If you like the content, please subscribe, like, all that fun stuff. I will have one coming for each team before the season starts. Now, at the start of the Patriots, we have rookie sensation Mac Jones, who was picked 15th overall and ended up being pretty unarguably the best rookie quarterback last season. He had great numbers across the board, 92.5 passer rating with a above 67% completion percentage, which made him some of the tops in the league in that regard. I think he was just a pretty great quarterback last year, rookie-wise, and I think he can only grow to improve. That being said, it doesn't always equal that great quarterback equals great fantasy quarterback. There's a lot of times where the numbers won't exactly match up. That can be due to a lot of things. In Mac Jones' case, it's due to several. One of them is the game planning. The Patriots were pretty cautious with how they used Jones. There were some games where they didn't really pass it at all. We know that infamous Bills game where he tried like 4 passes. But regardless, there are some games where he just is more of a game manager, or was more of a game manager, than he was a actual, fantasy viable quarterback, which is fine. His ceiling is definitely a bit limited, but he has a pretty solid floor. That being said, last season he did have 9 games with less than 13 fantasy points, which is less than ideal, and he doesn't really run the ball that well or that often. Just by design of the system, they'll tend to give it to their running backs a bit more or focus more on short design plays. That being said, I like his value a lot in maybe like a super flex league. I wouldn't necessarily target him in a redraft besides more than like a waiver wire filler. I think he'll end up around the same ranking. I could see him sneaking into the top 20 quarterbacks by the time the year's up, but his upside is severely limited by the game plan and also just his own ability to run the ball as well. Still had a great rookie season. Now we have Ramondre Stevenson and Damian Harris, the only two, I would say, viable running backs out of the Patriots backfield at the moment. Damian Harris, we'll start with him. He was the lead back last year. He's coming in around the rank RB29, and I think that is very low for him. I would take him out of his current ADP. I've seen ESPN mock drafts have him ranked in like the 80s and 90s, which I think is pretty unwarranted that he dropped that low. Not much has changed in the regard of the Patriots running back system besides just people being scared of the Patriots running back system, which is fair. They normally do tend to operate by committee. If Damian Harris messes up, he might not be in the same spot next game. It just really depends on what have you done for me now kind of mentality that the Patriots have adopted. That being said, Damian Harris did get the majority of high percentage looks. He was second in carries in the entire league inside the 10, which is a fantastic stat you want at a running back at this ranking. While his touchdowns might regress, I don't think those opportunities will. He's still pretty much seen as the goal line running back. And for a team that's trying to compete, given the pieces they have working with them, I don't see that changing anytime soon. And he did lead the league in overall points per snap. That being said, there always is the injury risk, and there's always a chance that he might lose some of that work in a committee, which is definitely a given the Patriots. He'll definitely not be the bell cow by any means, but the fact that his running back rank is dipped all the way below to 29 is a bit concerning, and I don't really see it being that low. I love him this year. I think he has a great value. Ramondre Stevenson is the second-year player now. He is ranked RB38, already ADP around 100. He's getting, the Patriots have a pretty good track record with getting running backs to jump up in year 2. And at an ADP of 104, you could do a lot worse than taking a chance on someone like Ramondre, who in the event that Damian Harris gets hurt, would probably most likely take in as the running back team roster on all fantasy teams from the Patriots. He's very talented. That being said, like with Damian Harris, having all the goal line work, that leaves a lack of touchdown upside with Ramondre Stevenson, as well as James White returning from injury. He's pretty forgotten about. He had more of like a J.D. McKissick-esque role last year. I'm going to say everyone had a J.D. McKissick role by the time this series is up, where he was a mostly pass-catching back. Nyheim Hines, we'll switch it up. He had a Nyheim Hines-esque role, where he was a very high-regarded pass-catching back who operated out of the backfield in that regard, which might eat into Ramondre Stevenson's snap count. Maybe even Damian Harris' snap count as a bit of a concern, but at their current ADPs, I think they're both pretty underrated. I wouldn't mind drafting either of them this year. Now, in terms of the wide receiver room for the Patriots, this is where it gets a bit murky. They really don't have the explosive playmakers they need, and also Mac Jones doesn't have the ability yet to really be relied on to distribute the ball evenly or fairly amongst the targets. So the only one I really like here is Jacoby Myers at an ADP of 134. He's been their leader in targets the past 2 seasons, and what I like the most is that on 92% of dropbacks he's ran routes, which is absolutely huge for a wide receiver at this late of a draft. I think his touchdown, infamous touchdown numbers should regress to the mean, which means he should be able to find pay dirt a couple times this year. And his ceiling is definitely not the highest that you'd expect, especially without the touchdowns. I think he can be a solid wide receiver 3 this year, which is at an ADP of 134. I absolutely love that value. Then you have the other receivers in the room. You have your Tyquan Thornton, who was just drafted. N'Keal Harry sent off to the Bears. See ya, buddy. But Devontae Parker was traded to them for, I believe, a 5th-round pick, and I do believe his best days are behind him, and I don't really have a confidence in him to be relied on as an everyday best receiver. That being said, he does have the best resume of any New England receiver, but his catch rate being low, and he's been injury prone these last few years. I think he can slot in as a wide receiver too behind Jacoby Myers, but I wouldn't rely on him on a consistent week-to-week basis. Kendrick Bourne as well, I couldn't not include him because he had some pretty good games last year. He was overall very high ceiling. He had some games with a couple scores, and he just had a lot of room to grow in that offense. But being slotted in as the wide receiver 3 on the New England Patriots, I'm going to dodge him, and I'm dodging every single wide receiver on New England that isn't named Jacoby Myers. I am targeting him wherever I can. Hunter Henry last year was a touchdown machine for the Patriots. It was him and Jonnu Smith was the big battle. Everyone, myself included, favored Jonnu Smith, and then Hunter Henry won that tight end room pretty early. He had his peak, top 10, top 5 tight end. Pretty much can be consistent if you get to the touchdowns, but he's pretty much due for some touchdown regression, and he's a little more inconsistent in that regard. I think his current ADP is fair, but I don't see him finishing as a top 15 tight end. There are a couple younger players, some with a little more upside that weren't as touchdown dependent last season, that I would be calling upon to get a higher ranking than Hunter Henry this year. I'm just not as high on him given his touchdown reliancy. Defense and kicker wise, I liked them all last year. If you had this stack last year, you were killing your league. There was that 1 month long stretch where Patriots defense picked off Matt Ryan 8 times, and then Nick Folk kicked 17 field goals, and it was insane. But regardless, I like them both this year. Folk just for opportunity wise, and also just overall consistency. He really didn't miss a lot of kicks. And even with the loss of J.C. Jackson, the Patriots defense is very well coached and very turnover prone. They are very good at getting the ball back, and outside of the Buffalo Bills, don't have the hardest division with the Jets and the Dolphins, and overall should be able to feast on some pretty weaker teams this year when they get around them in the schedule. Overall, this is a team, this is a team that you can invest in, and it's a little bit risky to do so because the floor is very low and the ceiling isn't as high as the risk might advertise. But Mac Jones is going to be better. They're going to open up the playbook a little bit. He's going to get more consistent, or not even more consistent, just take a little more risks, which should improve everybody on this team. In terms of values that I love, give me Jacoby Myers and Patriots defense wherever I can get them. Mac Jones in a super flex is a very fine piece for me. I like him as a bench piece there. And then the running back room is good to take a chance on. Damian Harris or Ramondre Stevenson should fill in good RB2 and RB3 value respectively, as well as Nick Folk as the kicker. That being said, any other playmaker not named Jacoby Myers, I'm staying away from in most regards. I don't really trust them in their development in the New England system. So that's what I got for this team. Let me know whether you agree, disagree, or any players I might have missed. Shout out to N'Keal Harry. I hope he lights it up in Chicago. We'll see. But overall, let me know what you think. Like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And I will see you in the next video.